So welcome everyone to Facilitating Instruction Online with Christy Conte. It's a pleasure that you're all here. This is part of PSHSA's Return to the Workplace virtual conference, and we're very excited about this session. My name is Marla Wolf. I will be one of the co-moderators. I am a product specialist at PSHSA, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all to this session. As well, we have a co-moderator, Christine Jolicoeur, who is a health and safety specialist, consultant, and amazing SME at PSHSA, and she will be also helping with the chats. So before we begin, I just want to mention a few housekeeping items. There will be an opportunity for Christy to answer your questions. Feel free to put them in the chat text right now. Christine will be gathering them and answering as Christy's presenting, but there will be a Q&A session for 5 minutes at the end, and you'll also have an opportunity to put in questions then as well. So we will be coming in and out and letting Christy know too about time. So I'd like to introduce Christy. She's our featured speaker. Christy Conte works with PSHSA as a curriculum specialist. She has written learning and development strategies for global organizations. She's designed, she's delivered innovative digital classroom and blended programs for diverse learner groups. Christy has several thousand hours of experience teaching via educational television and moderating across numerous web platforms. And she loves coaching business leaders and subject matter experts to shine online. She's a big believer in the value of technologically mediated learning. And Christy is using the current lockdown as an opportunity to finish a course in architectural theory via Harvard University's awesome edX or EDX platform. So this interactive and engaging session, Facilitating Instruction Online or How to Shine Online, is going to take you through steps on how to structure a course, how to adapt or create effective online activities, and most importantly, how to keep your learners engaged throughout a session. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Christy. Hi, Christy.
Hello, thank you, Marla. I am so thrilled to be here. This is one of my absolute favorite topics in the world. We've got so much to cover, and I just wanted to let people know that if you don't get the questions answered within the session, there will be an opportunity, if we don't get to it in the Q&A, to send an email afterwards, and I will follow up with people. And I hope you can find something useful to take away during this session. We're trying to make it practical. Now, one of the challenges you're going to have as an online facilitator is the fact that you've got a certain platform with certain functions in it or doesn't have the functions you want. In this session, for example, we're talking about interactivity, but it's not a virtual classroom. So I'm going to try and stretch the affordances in this session. We're going to do some text chat. We're going to try and simulate as much as possible the interactive elements that you have in a virtual classroom, and we'll see how it goes. So that's a bit of an experiment, but I think it mimics real life. One of the things that I want to stress when you're teaching online is that you don't have the cues. I don't have faces in front of me to read, so you have to figure out how you're going to see how your participants are doing. You're going to have to check in with them. You're going to have to make opportunities to check in with them. So let's start with a question. We don't have a polling function per se, but we do have text chat. So I want to know right off the top, how many online classes have you taught? And if you go to text chat, I hope you can see it up in the top right. Most of you will have been in sessions earlier today, so I hope you've discovered the text chat. In the text chat, just write the number. How many online classes have you taught? And if it's 0, that's perfectly fine, because I expect we've got a lot of people who haven't done this and are just anticipating doing it. So Leslie, thank you very much. 3, 6. We've got, I expect 0, 20 plus,
50 plus, another 30.
Excellent.
50 plus, you got some pros.
50 plus. Yeah, no, it's excellent. And I want to let people know that I expected we would have some expertise in the room. And so if you have something to share, please feel free to do that. We're going to talk about learner-to-learner sharing. So if you can do that, if you feel like sharing expertise or answering a question, go ahead and do it. I don't have a monopoly on knowledge. So let's go to the next question. Yeah, classes versus webinars, Lucy, that's a good distinction. We're not going to make a huge distinction, but there is one. We'll talk about definitions in a second. Next text chat question. What platform do you use most often? Or if you haven't taught any, what platform do you intend to use? And we have a couple examples up here on the next screen. There's Zoom, there's Adobe Connect, there's WebEx. If we can just go to the next screen. Yep. So, and there's others. There's many. There's platforms that I've used in the past that don't even exist anymore. There have been many. Teams, yep. WebEx, Zoom, yeah, Microsoft Teams. A lot of people are using that. Yeah, yep. All the Brightspace, Google Classroom. So we're not planning on addressing the functionality in specific platforms. You can just see by the number of choices there are that we couldn't have picked. But you're spread out quite a lot. Blackboard, of course. Some of these are meeting platforms and others are classrooms, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I have one more question for you. Thank you, everybody, for giving me that information. It's giving me a clearer idea of who's out there. Next question we have for you. Let's see. How do you feel about facilitating online? And this is open to people who've never done it and people who've done a lot of them. Are you pretty confident about it? A little bit confident? Slightly worried because you've been tasked with doing this and you don't really know exactly how you're going to address it? Or are you panicking? Let us know. There's some words you can use. Pretty confident, somewhat confident, worried, panicky. Just a note, if I were in a virtual classroom with a lot of interactive functionality, I would have done this by polling so we could all see clearly how people were answering. Aaron's got the sunglasses on. I read that as pretty confident. Yep, a little confident, looking forward to it, nervous. Yeah.
Interesting,
Again,
Christy. One person said nervous, more nervous than when I do it in person. Interesting.
Yeah, and I am not surprised. I think there's a bit of the fear of the unknown. How am I going to do this? So neutral. The tech issues for participants are a problem, sure. And if you have any empathy at all, and most of us do, you don't want that to happen. You want them to have a good session. And that goes for me. I want you to have a good session. And some things are out of my control. And one way you can deal with the fact that some things will be out of your control in a technical situation is to let people know up front. Name the creeping dread. In my case, I'm working from my home office. Garbage trucks are scheduled to go by probably in the next 40 minutes, which may interrupt our session. And I have a dog that may bark. So those are some of the glitches I'm trying to manage here. Thank you very much. I hope we can move the dial a little bit for you as we go forward and help you gain some confidence. I don't have a monopoly on the correct terminology or pretend that these are the only definitions. But just so we can baseline a little bit and you understand what I mean when I use these terms, here, yeah, rural internet is a huge problem. I know I spend a lot of time in a rural area and we have nothing. So Leslie, I feel your pain. Virtual class, virtual classroom, virtual class is a live or synchronous learning session. That's just one way of saying that it's happening in real time. A webinar, somebody alluded to this a little earlier. Typically a webinar differs from a virtual class, or in the way I understand it, that it's a one-way communication to a large group. You might have a Q&A at the end, but it's typically not that interactive. Next, e-learning. That's something that I also do here at PSHSA. E-learning is self-paced or asynchronous. It's not happening in real time. And that's when the learning materials are delivered to a computer or a mobile device and you just use them on, on your own time. There could be some interactivity developed as part of the e-learning. A SME, a subject matter expert. In this session, I'm billed as the subject matter expert, but as I saw earlier, we do have other subject matter experts, and I'm hoping you feel free to share all the kind of hard-won gems of wisdom that you've gotten. And the next, interactivity, I think is a word that's used a lot in this area, and it could be used. Sometimes a vendor will say, yes, we're selling interactive e-learning, and really it's just clicking next, next, next. I'd put that at the far end of the spectrum. At the more interactive end of the spectrum, I would say that anytime you have complex interactions involving people and material and media, then that could be a lot more interactive. There could be a lot more for the learner to do. So moving forward, I thought I'd give you an example of a session that I attended the last, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago now. And it was a really good example of an interactive learning session, even though it was delivered in a webinar format. I've put the link up here. And if I think it's helpful to have a mental model or to have a model of what a good session looks like, so you have something to shoot for. If people attending the session now have any contributions they want to make, good sessions they've seen recently that are available online, feel free to post them in chat. What made this such a good session? I think it was very relevant because the people who organized it went out to the attendees ahead of time and solicited what they wanted to hear, which was great. I would love to have done it here. We didn't have the opportunity, but that's always a great idea if you can swing it. It's relevant. It was addressed to people who are in lockdown mode. And it also had a very lively, I'll call it a back channel, a text channel. Although some people find text chat very distracting, there's also, if you use it strategically, it can be a very rich form of information for people. So can we paste that in chat? I think somebody probably can at some point. And if not, I'm happy to email it. It was an interesting session, and I found there were 700 people that attended. It was 2 hours long of me glued to my screen. And I saw so many links, so many blog posts, so many people contacts that me as a adult learner, I could follow up and pursue my education on the topic afterwards. To me, that's a really great session. So let's move forward. We will try and get that link to you. Let's talk about some of the roles that we have in a session. As I was writing this up, I thought really the only role that you have to have in the session is the learner. So there's always learners if you're teaching somebody, and they could be teaching each other. But let's go in order. The subject matter expert is the person who is leading the session or facilitating the session. Producers and moderators have slightly overlapping roles, and it depends on who's using the terminology. They'll sort of define it as is appropriate. But a producer typically is looking after the back end, the technical connectivity issues, the text chat. Moderators also can look after the text chat. We have Marla and Christine moderating on this session, so they're sharing those duties, but a moderator will typically look at things like making sure that the session is flowing properly, addressing questions, soliciting questions, just making sure the session flows and that conversation flows. And the learners, of course, and learners do have roles. I think in a webinar, they have less of a role. They're just sitting there absorbing, presumably, but in a virtual class, I like to see a more active role. Thank you. Colleen, I hope I have your name right. Now, you can do fantastic things in online learning. I've been doing it for over 20 years, but I think it's good to go into it knowing that there are some challenges that you have to address. And I'm a conflict resolution person, a mediator by training years ago, and so I like to put all the conflicts out on the table so you can address them. The first issue is lack of presence. And presence is defined in the academic literature. You can have cognitive presence, teacher presence, social presence. All you need to know is presence is what learners and teachers use to interact with each other for the purpose of learning. You don't have that. We're all over the place. I'm not sitting across from you. I can't see you. Presence is a very real issue. So we have to address that somehow. So let's move forward. Another problem we have is too much instructor. Just wah, 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 talk, talk, talk. If you're a fan of Charlie Brown cartoons, you know that droning on of one voice, that can be an issue, unrelieved by any other types of interaction. And I'd say the third challenge, and these are subjective, is when you try to replicate the classroom experience. And that's not a difficult thing to do, because if you've only ever taught in a classroom, that's your mental model. And so that's your thinking about this new medium is limited. So let's talk about how you address these things. Okay, let's go to lack of presence. What's wrong with, how does that manifest itself? If there's no presence, no teacher presence, instructor presence in the virtual session, learners are going to feel disconnected from the class, right? They'll have no sense of a community. They'll have no sense of being linked to the instructor, and they won't be motivated to participate or to even really pay attention. How do you fix that problem? There are ways. So let's talk about that. And if people have ideas themselves, I'd love to hear them. The first is to make eye contact. The interesting thing in the literature, if anybody has ever heard of the no significant difference phenomenon, that's a study that started ages ago in the 90s and has been replicated many times since. A meta study looking at the outcomes, learning outcomes between classrooms, physical classrooms, and online. And they discovered that there really was no difference when the presence issue is addressed, surprisingly. So I think it's important to know that, so you go in with a positive attitude that you can actually teach online. So make eye contact. And one thing I wanted to point out, I find that eye contact is difficult if you have a light shining on. If you look at your camera right now, you might see a little light if you're when your video goes on. So I put this. I don't know, can people see that? I put a little piece of paper over that so I can look straight in the camera. You don't want to be looking down, looking here. That's okay once in a while, but you really don't want to go through an hour or two, or, heaven forbid, 3 hours of just staring down at your notes. Think of that professor in your first year survey course in university who stared at the podium the whole time. Another way to create presence in the virtual classroom is to appreciate contributions. So, I would look at chat and I would comment on, that's a great contribution, Kelly, thanks very much, or Colleen, thanks for offering up that suggestion, or can you give me another example, Bob? Appreciating the contributions that you do get. Then they get the sense that there's a connection between you. And the most important thing is seeking feedback and constantly, and building that into your session. It doesn't just happen. Years ago, when I was responsible for hiring teachers to teach on educational television, we would find some fantastic classroom teachers. And these were people who had, excellent emotional intelligence. They were very capable of looking at a classroom and engaging people and reading their body language. We put them in front of a camera, and most would fall apart. They never had the opportunity to learn another way of soliciting that feedback. They were so reliant on visual cues. So you have to build that in. You have to build that in. So that could be polling, text chats, raised hands, just asking people for a raised hand. I don't think we have that functionality here, but it's really important to build those things into your session. Even if you're just moving something from classroom to online, go through and say, how am I going to check in here? How am I going to check in there? Okay. So what's going on here? We're on to our next problem. Does he look engaged? No, nothing is going on there. He's listening. He's just watching. It's a passive activity, and he's disengaged. I don't know how many people have heard of studies. It was done years and years ago where they looked at people's brain activity as they watched television and found it was less active. I'm not an expert in brain science, but there was less activity going on in some critical areas of the brain than there was during sleep. So yeah, somebody heard that. Thank you, Derek. Yeah, so it's a passive activity. As much as possible, you don't want people to be zoning out. What's happened here? Yay! How do we fix the too much instructor problem? Let's look at some solutions. He's not listening to the instructor, but what is he doing now? What do you think? The answer is in the types of interaction. Yeah, we can move forward. I like to think of 4 types of interaction that you could build in, and I really think you should try. It's appropriate in most situations. Let's look at the 4 of them. One is learner to learner. Sorry, maybe we can check in with Marilyn and find out what she's looking for. Learner to learner. That's the knowledge sharing that learners can do. You see it here in the classroom. They're in a small group. They're talking, sharing information. That's what I experienced in that food webinar a few weeks ago. Let's look at an example. We could try it now. Okay, we can try it now. Let's see an example of what we might do in this session to support learner-to-learner interaction. In text chat, here's the question for you to share information with your peers. What great new food source have you discovered since the lockdown? And oh, I see. Where did you get the raised hand? Okay, so think of that. What new food source? I found some farmers who started up a virtual farmers market. And I am now buying from this virtual farmers market. The emojis are a big topic. Share some information as far as what I know we had trouble getting into the grocery stores, or a lot of people, depending on where they are in the province or in the world, can't get to a grocery store. Aaron, yes, pantry. I'm a lover of pantry, being self-sufficient too. Random mint is growing in my garden. Yes, yep. Mint has a tendency to do that. Some people were prepared, freezers. I have farmer friends. I get food from them. Buy my, some meats and vegetables. Started an herb garden. So there's lots of there's different questions I tried there just to do something timely and topical that I thought a lot of people could probably participate in. But you could definitely use that in most topics, most topic areas. A lot of green thumbs. This is great. Let's go to the next one. Actually, before I do, let me just mention breakout rooms. We can stay on this slide. That's fine. How many people have, feel free to mention it, have used a breakout room online. A breakout room, we don't have that functionality here, but a breakout room is just like what the equivalent, the analog equivalent in a classroom. It's where you can separate people out, and suddenly you would have, instead of these 100 people or 86 people in one room, we put you out in separate rooms to talk to each other and work on a problem. So I would definitely say use breakout rooms if you can, as a good way to support learner to learner. So let's move ahead. Oh, good, Heather. Maybe people can hit you up with some questions about breakout rooms. I'd like to say more about them. We just have to keep moving. Learner to learner, or sorry, learner to teacher or teacher to learner. That's another type of interaction you should be looking at building into your sessions. And that could be as simple as interesting comment, Kelly, or Aaron, or Derek, or Lucy. Lucy has a question for breakout rooms. I'd say Zoom has good breakout rooms. I like a virtual classroom breakout room. See, this is my learner to teacher, learner to teacher, teacher to learner interaction with Lucy. A virtual classroom tends to have more functions built into the breakout room. You can put materials in there for them to work with. So if you need to do a lot of breakout room work, look for a platform that really supports learners in the breakout room. Next type of interaction, number 3, we've got learner to content. Now, this is one of my favorite. Let me just find an example for you. Learner to content is, there are studies that say, thanks, Jennifer. There are studies that say that if you want people to work deeply with content, or it's kind of complex subject matter, that you want to have them go away and work with the content on their own. Cognitively, it's easier for them to process than if you sit there and just hit them with it in a monologue. So here's an example. We're not going to do this. This is just an example of how I might set up an interaction where learners will interact with content. So just take a second and read that. Now, this is a great type of interaction for a couple of reasons. One, it helps to relieve learner fatigue. They've been listening to one voice. That's difficult for a long stretch of time. So this gets them focused on something different. It relieves teacher fatigue, facilitator fatigue, because now people are off doing something different. And it allows for a little bit of opportunity to deal with more complex material. So, and it aids knowledge transfer, right? In this particular example that I've got down here, presumably you're teaching about hazards. You want people to to know how to work with statutes and legislation guidelines and protocols, etc. So you want people to be able to do that in the classroom. This is going to help with knowledge transfer. Yeah, Aaron, I agree. Aaron says, why not ask the audience for their own real business case and use that? Problem-based learning. Feel free to say more about that, Aaron. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways and think about it. I like to go through, if I'm designing a session, I go through and I think of, okay, what do I have that's learner to learner, learner to teacher, learner to content? The next one that we're looking at, let's go down. Learner to world. This is one of my favorites. Now, this is a description. I'll just quickly tell you one of my favorite interactions of all times. I was teaching auto technicians at about 400 sites across the country, and these were not this is quite a while ago. These were not technical people. They weren't desk and computer people. So at one point we were talking about customer service, and I said, why don't you get up out of your chair right now, head out to the customer service area and document what you see, write down what you see, and come back and tell us. We had such a great interaction when they came back. They were saying, oh, I see screaming kids. I see garbage. Someone left their food wrappers on the table out in the seating area. I see people lined up looking for staff to help them. And that was so much more effective, as well as being an ergo break for people. If I was doing an ergo lesson, I know Christine Jolicoeur, our moderator, is an ergonomist, and if I wanted to ask right now, hey everybody, show me your office setup, your home office setup. Take a picture of 2 things you could correct. I would show you. I don't know how much you can see, but I would show you my chair, which is kind of an ergonomic hazard. But anyway, there's lots you could do in that area. So I hope you will look at those ways of building interaction into your session. The final challenge we have is trying not to replicate the classroom experience. So let's look at the problem. I know you know this. The virtual classroom is not a classroom. It's a technologically mediated environment. You don't have a captive audience. I don't know how many of you are looking at your phone or dealing with children or pets. We're geographically distant from each other, and we have all these competing distractions, right? So what can you do about it? What can you do about it? It seems insurmountable, but there are some things you can do. Let's look at some ideas. Number 1, be more compelling. Try to be more compelling and engaging. And there's so many ways you can do it. And I'm happy to have people contribute here if you have ideas on how to be more engaging with your media. Pictures, that's me, that's Marla, our moderator Marla. We both have dogs. Our dogs like each other, they're friends. Are those the most compelling pictures I could have added? Possibly not, but they did personalize it a little bit just to give you an idea of how you might approach it. Something else you can do, and I'm sorry that you won't be able to hear this, I've developed with audio in mind. Having done a bit of work in radio, I really am sort of in love with using audio. And this audio that you can't hear, I'll try to paint a mental picture for you. We were doing a course, an e-learning course on research out of St. Michael's, and it was on contact dermatitis. I happened to know somebody who was suffering from a really severe case of the disease they were studying. So instead of just documenting the research in this e-learning, I interviewed him, and we set it up like an interview. So I just asked him what it was like going back to work, how difficult was it to find treatment options, what challenges did he find trying to access occupational health and safety resources at his workplace, and recorded him just speaking. And you can hear in his voice, when you hear the audio, things that I don't think we could have captured in a PowerPoint. You could hear the frustration, you can hear the challenges that he faced. So look at audio as an option. Something else you can do, use your voice. I worked with an auditor. We were doing something on audit standards. It was an online virtual classroom. He went into full drone mode. Yes, I have used music at the beginning of a session. Happy to talk about that if we have any time at the end. I have musical instruments behind me. Yes. So this audit standards presentation was just deadly dull. It sounded like he was delivering a eulogy. It was not at all motivating. In chatting with this guy at the end of at a break, he actually it came out that he is such a sports fan. He trained when he was trying to be a partner at his firm. He went and did broadcasting school. So he did broadcasting school, and was so good with his voice that he was working part-time. He was a $400 an hour accounting partner and working part-time at the Fan doing play-by-play. Well, didn't his voice light up? Didn't he become a different person, a lot more compelling? I got him a telestrator, which is, allows you to write online. And we had him doing kind of play-by-plays and marking up and treating it more like a performance. And when he was able to shift his model that way and not think of himself as reading a PowerPoint, that really sparked something. So think of what you're good at with your voice. Think of, or if you're working with a SME, try to light them up. And next, one of my all-time favorites, tell stories. And I believe that just about any topic lends itself to a story. And if you don't believe me, how many people, and if you do, how many people know Under the Influence, the podcast by Terry O'Reilly, an ad agency guy? One particular episode, this is it. If you Google it, or I'm not sure if we can get the link up there, happy to provide it to people. This is a podcast that talks about the behind the scenes of advertising. Setting the table is the rationale and a bit of information on the stories that he uses to set up every one of the 300 podcasts he's done. So what he does is he has a short story that may or may not be right on the topic, but it gets the learner in, or the listener in this case, gets the listener into the right frame of mind to be receptive to what his episode is going to be about. So tell stories. If you have a personal, oh good, Amy says she's a fan. If you have a personal connection to the topic you're teaching on, share it. If you have, I've done that, and you get, people are wrapped at that point. That's another way of injecting presence. So figure out how you can tell stories. The Moth is another great storytelling podcast, gives you ideas on how to set up a story. Try to develop an arc. You can get people to help you with that. But it does, it's a balm, I think, for dry material. It gives it life. So let's let's consider, those are all the challenges. Let's quickly consider, what can you do online that you can't do in a classroom? This is where, once you get over these hurdles, this is the most exciting part of teaching online to me. Once you realize, okay, I can address this, lack of presence, and all these other challenges, what can you do? I was thinking, Marla and I were comparing notes yesterday as we were talking about this session, and I thought of another one, Marla. I could eat garlic at lunch, and I can teach, and it's not a big issue. What else can you do online? I think we're starting to get close to the end of the session, so here's two that I find. These certainly are not the only two things that you can do online that you can't do as well in the classroom, but they're two of my go-tos. So let's talk about anonymous polling first. One of the things you can do with anonymous polling is work with the fact that people like anonymity cloaks. Think Harry Potter. Think of the things that you could ask if someone doesn't have eyeballs on them. I'm laughing at some of these. Oh, good question, Sarah. I'll have to get to that maybe at the Q&A. If I were teaching a class on hazard recognition in the workplace, I might ask, what are the barriers that you face in your workplace in addressing hazards? And I might have a mixed session of managers and workers. How many people are going to put their hand up and say, oh, well, this is the lowdown on what's going on here. Nobody cares. Dim lighting, nobody pays any attention. You're not going to get that. But if you ask in an anonymous poll and really think carefully as you're setting up your session, what information do I need to, that might be a little sensitive, and how can I get that information to help me help them? You might ask, how many people face barriers? 90% do. Okay. Is it your management's receptivity? You could drill down a bit and then get to the issue of barriers and use that as formative information for your session, which gets into the next number 2, which is you can use the when you have polling from people, you can use the responses to guide how deeply you go into the content. If I had polling here, I would ask you a lot of questions about the level you're at now, so I would know, I was planning on going here, I can go deeper, or vice versa. Yeah, I agree, Erin. Yep, Erin's got some good comments. She's done this before. The other thing, there is research that shows, and again, I can share that with you at some point if anybody requests it, that polling is seen as a very low risk interaction. In a classroom, you often will find that 1 or 2 people dominate, right? Whereas you don't get that in text chat as much. And the fourth, I'm going to fly through these. It's low risk, and it increases the immediacy and the social presence of the facilitator. Okay? So those are some things you can do. Text channel, let's go quickly through that. Text channel, we can move ahead. You can increase the sense of community in the group using text. Great peer-to-peer information sharing, and as the instructor, it's often nice to give people open the door for them and welcome them to do that. It's a non-threatening way for learners to ask questions. I might not want to put my hand up in a classroom, but in text, I can get my needs met a little bit more easily. And you can respond, learners can respond really quickly. If I said, what city are you in right now? Tell me what town or city you're in, everybody, in text. And watch how quickly those come in. You can get the answers almost instantaneously. So best practices, private chat, peer-to-peer you can do as well. Number 1, work on your social presence. Number 2, you can build in lots of interactions, vary the type, vary the, also add movement. The reason we have so many slides is because something's always changing. There's movement on the screen. Number 3, practice, practice, practice. The very first time I went on TV, I was the very first person when our network went live to air, and it failed. Within 10 minutes, we had a total fail, but I've been practicing every day for 3 months. So how confident do you feel now? If you have questions, we have 2 minutes. Wow, you're all over the place. I really appreciate people having come in from all over. It's a beautiful sunny day in southern and eastern Ontario. So the fact that you chose to spend it on the computer with us, I am very appreciative of that fact. Here are some resources. I am not changing slides. And the idea is that you're going to get to watch this later. So if we're going a little quickly now, we just want to make sure we've gotten through everything. I'm happy to answer any questions now, and we will be booted out.
We will. So you know what? Maybe we can put up your contact information, and firstly thank everyone for attending. It's a short cutoff. We went through and answered questions throughout, so unfortunately there's no time for Q&A. But
1 second, I'm going to.
Thank you all for joining.
What I'm going to do, Marla.
Thank you, wonderful Christy.
It was a wrong note.
Such a great, interactive, and exciting, interesting session, and you shine so brightly. So thank you. And I apologize. We're going to be.
Thanks for playing along, everybody.
Thank you. And
thanks, everybody.